Well, good afternoon, everybody. If you want to say it's a good afternoon, is August out there, believe it or not. It feels like September. Trees are looking like October. I don't know what's going on out there, but we do know what's going on with taxes. I'm Chris Fabian from EG Tax. I'm here in studio with my lovely wife, Tiffany.
Hello, Christopher. And today we have joining us Tim Eliason. You've heard us mention him many times. He's our resident healthcare expert, and so we're fortunate today to have him in-house. And before he says hello, I just want to say I know Esther's in a warm place. I called her, talked to her today. It's warm in Florida. It might not be here, but it is there. And so she'll be joining us again next week. And Tim, why don't you say hi and we're
going to pick your brain.
That's great. I'm Tim Eliason. I work with EG Tax. I'm at the corporate office with Tiffany and Chris, and just want to talk to everybody about what's going on presently with healthcare. We're in the middle of the year where it takes effect, and we just have a lot of things to cover.
Right. And so if you have questions...
803-0930, 803-0930, star 930 on your cell phone. If you're in Rochester or Larry from Georgia, must call the 1-800-616-9236 number. We're here to help you not only with taxes, but healthcare. You know, got those love letters from the IRS, New York State, don't know what to do with it. Let us see them first before you pay.
Right. I can tell you Tim and his position sort of came out of necessity, and then we discovered he was very, very good with it, and he sort of ran with the gauntlet from there. Last year, if you recall, Obamacare was passed, and so the tax industry became involved because if you when you have health insurance this year, when you sit to do your taxes, you have to document who's your provider, the number, and there's a penalty if you don't have health insurance. There's reasons to avoid the penalty, and we'll get into that. But because of knowing that, last year, New York State's marketplace opened up, and Tim would literally take a person who didn't have health insurance and work with them to go on the marketplace and get the best bang for your buck, if you will. And so, Tim, is that a long and tedious process to go through New York State's marketplace to get health insurance?
Actually, New York State's been very beneficial. I did have a couple experiences with the federal website, and it did not, obviously, we saw in the news, it did not work as fluent as the New York State one. But the New York State one, other than the times going up against deadlines, has worked very well. It has been very, very good. You've been able to get information in, dialing the 855 number for the marketplace. They've been very supportive, and they'll help you get in there, and they'll do even a screen share with you while you're on your computer.
And then, am I right, New York State has hired healthcare navigators, right? And one of them that we've talked about in the past is Kristen LaFasa. Mm-hmm. And so you can call her, and she's also helpful, right?
Yep, she's actually the navigator. She got married since that, so she's now Kristen Culligan.
Okay.
So, and because her email changed too, but she's up in Niagara County at the Niagara Falls Medical Center up there. Had a chance to meet with her, all the navigators at area medical centers up there, and then what they call CACs, which are certified affordable care counselors. And they work with the navigators going through things, and they actually have a team of neighborhood legal services that help people out should they have to go through the appeal process.
And, we're not a navigator at EG Tax. We're not a CAC, but we are here to help people. Mm-hmm. And that's because people ask us, why did you do it? Why do you learn it? Well, the government's making us because we're the end result. We're the enforcers of it. So we have to know it to explain to our clients. And if we know it, at EG Tax, we want to make sure everybody knows it.
Exactly. When I've been meeting and going and speaking to the navigators at their staff meetings, if you will, when you sit down and talk with them, they realize that when everybody goes to do their tax return for 2014, that either themselves or us as tax preparers are going to be the ones that are going to answer all of the questions. It's not going to be their doctor or their hospital or anything like that, or even the marketplace.
And so, Tim, Chris mentioned that we will help you. And so what is it if somebody needs help? What do you help people do?
Well, you can do a couple different things. Some people I sit down with, because obviously some people do not have access to the internet. So we need to set them up, because that is the marketplace is something that they do this through. It's really driven through the New York State Marketplace website. So I'll sit down with them, and even to the point that some of them I've had to help them establish an email so that they can get in and do this. We get their information in. We do what's called build their household, so that we find who lives with them as far as their tax household and gets them ready as far as the information that they need to have in order to see what they qualify as far as any tax credits or what type of coverage they will qualify for as a household.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
And I know open enrollment now for 2015 doesn't start till like November 15th.
Exactly. The timeline that we're in, March 31st ended the first enrollment period, and that was the one. And actually, believe it or not, between January 1st and March 31st, 75% of the New York State's applications were processed. It wasn't right up to the end of the year where everybody was kind of wondering about it. Most of them took place after the first of the year.
And now, but though, if something happens in your life, you don't have to wait till November 15th to sign on. You can.
That's right. The next normal open enrollment period starts November 15th, and that would be for insurance to start January 1st of 2015. However, if you have a life-changing event right now, you can do special enrollment. And some of those can be that you lost coverage because something happened with your job or your employer has changed it. You got married, had a child, became a citizen. Even for those with qualified health plans through the marketplace, they may be able to do some things and change some things because they have, they're able to go and do cost share reduction, which changes the level of their coverage and how their things take place. And there's several other ones that qualify for this.
Okay. We're going to go to the phones, and if you have any questions, 803-0930, 803-0930, star 930 on the cell phone, and we're going to talk to Helen. Hi, Helen. How can we help you?
Hello. How are you doing today?
We're doing staying warm.
There we go.
What can we help you with?
Well, I have a question. I live in New York, and we have like a side little business cleaning offices. And it's like an independent contractor where we bill them, we invoice them monthly, and they pay us.
Gotcha.
So a friend of ours has a like lawn mowing, snow plowing business. He's had it for a number of years. He was recently contacted by the IRS because he...
Uh-oh. Helen? Did we lose Helen? I think we just lost Helen. Helen, give us a call back. We'll take your call.
I just wanted to talk about maybe what she was going to ask. And so she's right. She's an independent contractor, and so that means that she could either be a C Corp, an S Corp, a DBA, a partnership. And then it sounds like her neighbor also is an independent contractor, which means they're not paid on W-2. They're paid on 1099. And so it sounds like the IRS contacted her.
Okay, yeah. If it was IRS, maybe he didn't report his full 1099 income. He might have thought he made $5,000, but his 1099s totaled $6,000, so they could have questioned that. But one of the big things we do see is these small self-employed people forget about New York State. And with that, I mean sales tax. And you have to register with sales tax. Cleaning business is subject to it. Your lawn care, snow removal business, that's subject to sales tax. And they get filed quarterly unless New York State calls you or emails you, texts you, not text you, they don't text. They're not that technologically savvy yet. But they'll send you a letter saying, hey, guess what? You're going to go on an annual filer. You're so small right now. But you have to pay your sales tax on a timely fashion. And if you don't, that can get built up so fast. I had someone actually been helping with the last 2 days that in early 2000s going through a divorce, lawyer told him not to pay his sales tax. Well, a $17,000 sales tax bill over a year and a half is about $85,000 right now.
That's absurd.
And that's interest. I mean, I want to put that much money in a bank to get that much interest.
And they won't waive it. I mean,
we're working for an offer in compromise, but again, if you're small business, call New York State to see about sales tax. We're here to help you with your tax situations. Tim is here for health care. We're going to take more calls after the break, 803-0930, star 930. We'll see you on the other side. Okay, and we're back. Chris Fabian from EG Tax with Tiffany. Special guest star Tim Eliason.
Hello.
Who also works with us at EG Tax, but is our healthcare specialist, and I believe Tiffany.
I thought Helen had a great question, and it parlays into something else healthcare related. Is when Tim is helping people navigate through the marketplace, a lot of them are W-2 employees. But Tim, there's also a lot of people who are self-employed and they're not W-2 income-based employees. So how would that group of people apply for health insurance through the marketplace?
They have two options depending on the size of their business. Obviously, there's the individual marketplace. If they're a Schedule C, which is a small employer, sole proprietor, they can do it through that, or they can actually go through the small business marketplace. So they have two options. Right now, what they're seeing in New York State is about 95% of those people are going through the individual marketplace. They're not seeing activity in the small business one. Now,
Why?
It's just
easier?
a much simpler thing, and the
Okay.
options tend to be much better.
Okay.
The small business marketplace is really intended for those places that have those 50 or more employees that are trying to set up a healthcare plan for a small business per se. So that's generally where they're driven into that. But those people that do qualify as sole proprietors on Schedule C, they really have to make sure that they're getting their information in there correctly. Part of the application process is to make sure that their income and expenses are current. The marketplace will only ask for a 3-month window, or the last 3 months. However, when they get in there and they do that, and if their income is variable, which tends to be on a small business, if it's a seasonal something like landscaping or anything like that, they have to make sure it's accurate, because otherwise when they go to do their tax return for 2014, they could be very surprised with what happens to their refund or a penalty on their tax return.
Yep. And now if you have questions, 803-0930, 803-0930, star 930 on your cell phone. And it is, I know I've helped people before with the two being self-employed or even with rental property.
Yep.
Doing the healthcare application is almost like doing their tax return, page 1 of their tax return, because you have to say, here's my gross income, here's my monthly expense for January for advertising, blah, 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 all the way down. Here it is for February. So you have to prove it, and then they'll even ask you for the last 2 years' worth of tax returns possibly, too.
Exactly. And, that's where we've been such a big help for people going to the marketplace, because we've found that a lot of people that have gone to navigators that are not knowledgeable tax preparers, they're not sure how to get that information from the tax return into the application accurately. One of the things that I talk to the navigators when I talk to them is they have a lot of questions about Schedule C's and self-employment. How do we get it in there? You call the New York State Marketplace, they tend to like to just lump it in the wrong place. They just put it under adjustments to income as one big thing, like they're a performing artist, and that's not where it belongs. So that can make that number inaccurate. So it's always very good to double check that. And now is the time to check that up, because you don't want to get caught.
And it could be, when you call New York State, they don't understand tax law, and so they're going to just lump it together as an adjustment when, in actuality, that's not what it would be. It's sort of that old creedage, money in, money out, and so you want to keep track of those expenses when you're doing your health care information.
Exactly.
And one of the things is penalties. One of the greatest misconceptions, I guess you could say, is what the penalty was the first year.
Well, everything that was out in the media and everything that was publicized said that it was going to be a maximum of $285. They were kind of basing it on per person in the tax household.
Up to 3 people.
Or 1% of your income. But it's the greater of the two. It's not just or, it's the greater of the two. Prime example is if a married couple with 2 children makes $70,000 and they do not have what would be considered minimum essential coverage for any family member during any month during 2014, their penalty could be $497 this year. Everybody had the thoughts and saw the publicity from the media that it was going to be $285. No, you take your income, you subtract what would be their filing threshold, which is when do you have to file taxes, that number that comes up. And when you subtract that, there's a formula that the IRS uses, and that will supposedly be on the tax forms and the tax return that shows that how much their penalty is going to be.
Yeah, I know when I was doing tax returns for 2013, January through April of 2014, everybody was like, oh, okay, I know you're going to ask me about my health insurance, but in actuality, when we were doing the tax return January through April, that was for 2013. So when you're talking about the penalty, that's when people are sitting down doing their taxes January through April of 2015, and it's something that's going to be an issue on their 2014 tax return, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's going to be another form on your return. The form is not out yet. The IRS
How
is,
come the form is not out yet?
I found one, but they took it off the website. They must have not had it finalized yet. So they have not finalized the form. I'm
Right.
sure it's going to be a form that will calculate things based on your income and just what we talked about, your filing threshold to see. And, the only form that I've seen is the ones that I've done for clients that live in Massachusetts or
Right.
have students that are residents and go to Massachusetts.
Right.
So they start to ask on there, who's your health provider?
What's the
what's your
ID number?
coverage?
When does it
How much
expire?
are you paying? Things like that. So they ask all of that, even for a student in Massachusetts. So they are going to have to be prepared to bring that for their tax returns.
Yeah, what Tim is talking about is I've been doing taxes for about 13 or 14 years, and I've done a handful of Massachusetts tax return. And in Massachusetts, it's been the law for how long,
Years.
Chris? Years, that you have to have health insurance, and if not, you're fined accordingly. So now they've taken this and made this a federal mandate, and so the IRS form is not out yet. And so the only thing that Tim can do is look at that Massachusetts form and glean some ideas of what that federal form might be like. And so that's what he's referring to.
Yeah. And this year it is a 1% penalty. Next year it's a 2% penalty. Then it goes to 2.5%.
Exactly.
I mean, and there's no maximum.
No.
It all the income.
Really, there isn't. If somebody is, has very high income, there are scenarios within the application of the rule and the processing the penalty to do the or that some people could see, $10,000-$12,000 penalties on their tax returns if they're of higher income and don't have insurance.
Right. And, one of the things the government did to help people was also put in a assistance program where they're going to help you have the election. You can help to get the reduced cost health insurance now when you're paying your monthly premium, or pay the full premium and get a credit later. But also the thing is, when they match it, and correct me if I'm wrong, when they put the pieces together, if you took the credit during the year and they were giving you $500 a month and you were only supposed to get $400 a month, what's going to happen?
That's where you're going to see that impact their refund on their tax return. Because just like taking any credit during the year, if you take it and you take too much, then that's going to be calculated into the way your refund works on your tax return when you complete it for 2014.
So I think that ties into your second question that you have written here. You said, I'm currently enrolled in the healthcare through the New York State Marketplace. Is there anything I need to do before the end of 2014? And I think that's what you're referring to. You should take a look at where your income sits for the year. Am I right?
Exactly. When we were doing these for clients starting out in January 2014, we were trying to break out our crystal ball and try to predict what their income for 2014 was going to be. If somebody was in a job transition, how long were they going to receive unemployment? Because that's calculated. Or were they somebody of age where was going to start receiving Social Security? Or were they a small business starting up and they didn't know what their sales? All these things that we were trying to predict. And if we predicted incorrectly and we were a little bit high, this is the time they need to make the adjustments in the marketplace. If they wait and don't do anything, that's where, as Chris said, they're going to see it on their tax return for 2014.
And then I think something really will hit everybody's hot point. And I thought it was pretty interesting that you did some research on this. All those courts that they took, those mandates and those legislation that they tried to get rid of, some are part of Obamacare. What happened with those rulings, those judgments that they issued in courts?
There have been rulings. Obviously, which side of the fence you're on, there's appeal processes going through those. But as far as right now and going into the end of this tax year, nothing has changed in the Affordable Care Act. Nothing has gone through to change the law. There has been decisions in the courts that would impact the law, but because of where they are in the process, in the legal process, they haven't changed anything. So it's still status quo as we know the law right now.
Yep. And, if you have questions in regard to this, your taxes, 803-0930, 803-0930, star 930 on your cell phone. But the whole thing is you want to stay up to date. You want to tell New York State what's going on with your life. And I believe, Tim, you just had this experience, and you learned you have to follow up with everything you do when you do your situation.
Exactly. I went through the process myself. I have a son that's getting married in December. Had to go in, and just as we were just talking about, anytime you have one of those life-changing events, a birth, a marriage, moving to another address, changes in income, if you've been incarcerated or been released. So, anything else that would be a life-changing event. My son's getting married. I went in to change so that he, once he was married, would have health insurance and he would be able to carry that forward with his new bride. And what happened with the process is he went through just as slick as could be. The rest of the household was dropped, and we had to redo the whole application process and start from scratch. The thing that's going on right now in the transition of the marketplace is the upload of documents. They ask you to verify things. I went through it, and then I spoke to actually a gentleman yesterday, went through the same thing. My 14-year-old daughter, he had children that were 8 and 10. They kept holding it up for verification of income for those. Obviously, in New York,
for the children,
14,
not for you, but for the children.
14 years old, 8 and 10 years old, they were asking you to verify income and upload documents. Your only options were last 4 pay stubs, which in New York you're not supposed to work at that age legally.
Right.
A letter from their employer, which doesn't apply.
They don't have one.
And if they were self-employed. Now, my daughter does some babysitting, but I didn't picture the 8 and 10-year-old were on anybody's payroll or self-employed. But, the Kool-Aid stand on the corner probably didn't make enough money for that.
Yep. Okay. Well, we're coming up to the news. We're with EG Tax here to help you, 803-0930 on the other side of the news. We got our healthcare specialist in. You hear us mention him all the time, Tim Eliason. And we'll talk to you right after the news. Tom Petty, learning to fly. I got it right. And Esther's not here, and she doesn't even know we got it right. Chris from EG Tax here with Tiffany and Tim, talking about healthcare, tax issues. You just heard one of our commercials, we'll help you with anything, and we do. But if, this is something you want to learn how to do, make a little extra money on it too, is we have our tax school coming up. Starting in October. You learn the basics, get put into a job, and, we'll teach everything you want to know and stuff you didn't even know existed about taxes.
Yep, and the registration form is ready, so just give us a buzz during the week, Monday through Friday, 632-7886, and we'll mail you the form, or you can go to egtax.com and apply there. And before we get to the caller, I just wanted to ask Tim, so I don't have health insurance, and I'm going to get hit with a penalty, which is going to make steam come out of my ears, but say that happens. Is there any way, any exceptions, any means of me avoiding that penalty for not having health insurance?
Actually, that's the thing they have in place first. The healthcare.gov and the IRS has the exemption form, believe it or not, to avoid the tax penalty. We don't have the form to calculate, but that is in place first. And then there's also that you can have exemptions from payment of that penalty.
Okay, and some of those reasons are, you were telling me some of these, and they're pretty extensive.
Well, a lot of them fall into what they call hardship exemptions.
Right.
And, there's different things. And right now they have 14 categories. There's things that were you evicted in the past 6 months? Did you receive a shutoff notice from your utility company? Are you a victim of domestic violence? Did you file for bankruptcy? Did you have medical expenses that you couldn't pay from the last 24 months? All these different things, and obviously number 14 is kind of a catch-all. It is you experienced another hardship in obtaining health care, and actually the form says provide documentation if available.
And did you say there's different forms for each different exception, or there can be?
There can be. The hardship falls under one.
Okay.
There are some things that are exemptions for, we've heard in the news, different religious sects or different religious beliefs, and depending on your heritage for Native Americans or anything like that. So each exemption has a different form. The forms are about 4 pages long. They're pretty easy to fill out. They're not too bad. Step 1, Step 2, Step 3, they kind of lead you along. But it's interesting that those forms have been available for a few months now, but we have not seen the
to
forms.
calculate the penalty.
Nobody knows what's going to happen on their taxes yet.
And, if you want to follow us, seeing what happens as things change, roll out. Tim, you have it on Twitter. You have an EG Tax Healthcare account on Twitter, I believe.
Yep, it's at EGTax _ and it's HLTHCARE. That's EG Tax Healthcare. It's a Twitter account. Actually, what I've done is I'm following different organizations like the State of New York, Health and Human Services, things like that, all the different companies that are involved with this, IRS, and so you can see all the different information that they're putting out.
That's smart.
Okay.
That's very clever because that might be your best way to find out as things progress.
Yep.
And we're going to go to Tony from Clarence, who I understand you're going to argue with us, Tony. You better not. Tiffany will get mad at you.
Hey, Tiff, how you doing?
Hey, Tony. Long time no talk to you. How's your summer been?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I had
Good.
some surgery, but I'm doing okay.
Good.
Yeah, you know what, Tiff? You got two lovely men there. Be careful.
I know. I'm like sandwiched between them, which is
A
great.
Tiffany sandwich.
Please play is on, huh?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. You're calling this a penalty, but the judge from Buffalo, the Supreme Court justice in charge of the Supreme Court, Roberts from Buffalo, he called it a tax. That this is a tax that's going to be levied against those people who do not pay or do not have the insurance by the time so out by the law.
Okay.
Because if you recall, when he made the judgment that the Affordable Care Act was legal, he changed the word to tax.
Okay.
That word tax came into play because there was a dispute about what it was called, and he made it a tax, and that's how that law stood. Remember the judgment there, Tim, that took place. It wouldn't have been legal if it had been called anything but a tax.
Okay, hold on, Tony, hold on.
Yep, and you're exactly
Tim is
right.
shaking his head.
You're exactly right in the wording. But that was the way that the Supreme Court could find that they could keep the mandate to have everybody have health insurance was to call it a tax. The way the IRS is treating it on their tax returns, they're calling it a penalty. So it is both, and it's different words. But you're right that the judge did say it was a tax, but a lot of that had to do with, in order to get the mandate of making it the law that you have to have health insurance or face this penalty, they use the term tax.
And believe this one or not, Tony, because the IRS is saying it's a penalty. If, say, you end up owing money to the IRS because of this penalty, you owe them $800, and normally you would have got a $100 refund. The IRS, because it's not a tax, cannot put you into collections to collect that penalty.
Which is a really good point that Tony raises. Yeah.
Well, if it was classified as a tax by the IRS, the IRS can collect on it, can go after your wages, can go after your bank account.
Okay,
but
you're
because
right.
it's a penalty, they can't do that.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So it's a good thing and a bad thing, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. But and one other thing too is the majority of large companies already have their own form of health insurance, and the mandate really is not going to be effective in the large companies. Is effective, but it is not going to be needed, so to speak, because those large companies still are going to have people under their own health insurance.
Well, everything's going to change in 2017 when the large companies have to go into the healthcare system itself, because then you will start seeing these large companies say, I'd rather pay a $2,000 penalty than pay health insurance of $10,000 per employer. They're going to save $8,000 an employee.
And they're already starting to see that impact because there has been, just because of the marketplace and what's happening inside the marketplace as people apply and all these people are flooding into the health insurance part of it, premiums are starting to go up. So obviously the companies are going to have to compete with this too to cover the premiums that they pay for their employees and what portion they will decide to pay.
Tim, I have a question to follow up on that. Do you know officially how many people in the state of New York went through the actual signing up for the insurance, not in the Medicaid part, but in the regular insurance part?
Well, about 1.3 million people completed applications. Now, as of about the end of June, they had numbers of about 960,000 of those had actually enrolled in coverage through New York State's Health Individual Marketplace. So, that's how many people in New York took advantage of it.
What was the number again, Tim?
About 1.3 million applications and 960,000
Because
people enrolled.
we answered the call as Tony.
And they don't discuss how many people are getting free health insurance out of that almost 1 million people.
No.
They just say 960,000 people signed up for health insurance out of the 1.3 million applications.
And I think that this sort of parlays into a really good question is, Tim, what about those people who retired at the age of 62 and at the age of 65 is when Medicare starts kicking in. So what do they do for those few years that they have to have health insurance?
It's something that we're seeing evolve as we do tax returns. I know I've had clients where they've come in and I've helped them with the health care. What's happened is, opposed to them taking retirement 62 and their employer continuing to provide health care for them until they reach Medicare age, they're getting a lump sum or an account in their name that has funds in it, and then their former employer that they retired from tells them to go into the marketplace and then send them the bill to pay it out of this fund. That's what they're doing to keep their costs down. Tony had kind of mentioned about employers and what they're doing, but that's one of the things they're doing there.
Right.
And obviously in a situation like that, we talk to a lot of people, and I hear Esther always talking about to people about between 62 and 65, do I take Social Security? The health care now, and depending how it's going to work, should they take early retirement, it's going to work into their retirement equation.
Yes. I mean, sometimes, and if you have questions, 803-0930, 803-0930, star 930 on your cell phone. But a lot of times, though, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but it may be more beneficial for them to retire if they have a savings to live on for 3 years, and then they get Medicaid for 3 years. They hit 65, Medicare picks up, then they can start Social. I mean, it's a lot more to the math equation now than it used to be 3 years ago.
And what you're saying, Medicaid is something that's under the, correct me if I'm wrong, Healthy New York, and so if your income is below a certain threshold, you would qualify for this Medicaid, which we all know what Medicaid is, as you were saying, though, right?
Exactly. If you remember, there's tiers of it. The first tier takes effect at that 138% of the federal poverty level. What that is, that's where anybody below that is strictly Medicaid. Once they go above that, then there's another thing.
Right. But hold on. Medicaid now doesn't look at your net worth.
No.
They don't look at your assets. They don't look at your stock account. They don't look at your pension. They don't look at your savings account, your checking account. They just look at your income. Mm-hmm. So when I say these people can go on Medicaid, I don't mean they have to go out spend all their money to go on Medicaid. They just don't have to make any money.
Mm-hmm.
For the year.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on their income because, just as Chris said earlier, it's strictly like you're doing your tax return. Whatever that modified adjusted gross income is going to be on your tax return, that's the number that we're going to use to determine what their premium credit or their insurance premium, or even if they qualify for cost share reduction.
Okay. And we're going to take a short break, 803-0930 here in studio. At our office, 632-7886. You can get a hold of Tim there. But we will catch you in 2 minutes.
Good job.
Tony did pretty good.
Tony had some good one.
But he usually can
Argue?
he fights with us because he's very much the other side.
What do you mean?
He's very much
Lola.
I don't
Who sings it?
I don't know who sings it, but it is Lola. So we're 2 out of 2.
the Kinks.
The Kinks.
Kinks.
There we go.
Okay, before we go to the person holding, Tim, the healthcare reform has been very confusing. And a few callers back when Tony mentioned, or you guys mentioned together in 2017, the corporate business component is going to slide into fruition. And so what is that 2017 mandate for corporations or businesses? I don't completely understand it.
Well, there's several things that are going to take place down the road, and that's where, as Chris mentioned earlier, they're going to have to start going into the marketplace. Everything as far as getting insurance is going to be done through the marketplace. That's where they're going to have to shop it, because if they provide plans to their employees that are too good, in 2018, there's what they call the Cadillac tax or the luxury tax. And it's a pretty, I think it's 40%,
Yeah.
is what I saw last time.
Wow.
A 40% tax if your insurance that's provided by an employer is above a certain level. And you always hear them talking about bronze, gold, silver,
Wow.
platinum. You know, silver tends to be the standard. Bronze is used in the calculation of the penalty. But silver, and if it's too far above that and they deem that policy is too good, they can have, and the burden of the Cadillac tax is going to fall on the individual and what they pay.
Oh, so like my dad worked at Ford Motor Company, and his health insurance was really good. And so now, when a company's sitting down and looking at health insurance, that's bizarre. That's just
Yeah, but
bizarre.
that's one of those things down the line. I have a feeling that's where I don't foresee that a lot of things can change with how far we are into the individual mandate.
Right.
But the business one, those are the ones I could see things probably being tweaked, because obviously, you know,
That's going to raise some feathers.
yes, exactly. You know, lobbyists or whatever they may be when they're putting pressure on their elected officials.
Well, you look at who's most of the biggest lobbyists are unions,
Mm-hmm.
and who has some of the best Cadillac plans for health insurance.
Yep.
Union employees. So I think you will see a lot of feathers being rustled.
I do, where I work at, to the office I work out of, I see a lot of union employees, and, you know, they have said already that their leaders in the unions and stuff had told them that when their collective bargaining agreement comes up next, they have to be prepared to look and see and really evaluate how health care is going to affect their collective bargaining agreement.
I think they need somebody like you on their team. God.
Okay, we're going to go to Steve from Lockport. Hey, Steve, how can we help you?
Yes, I've been listening to your talk show on this issue, and I'd like to mention that my wife works at a warehouse up here in the fall. There's a total of 5 employees. Now, she has tried to get on this New York State mandate health care plan, and because she works, they want $500 a month just for her for health insurance. Now, you mentioned that like 900,000 people got on it through New York State. Now, I'll bet you how many millions that work did not get on it or can't because they can't afford the $500 payment. It's like they're sweeping the middle class right underneath the carpet, or better yet, out the door.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, and that's the thing a lot of people see, you know, and when you go on, if you go onto our website and things like that, we actually have a very simple little estimator that can take a look at your household's taxable income or modified adjusted gross income and calculate the premium. But a lot of people forget that there's different phases of how the premium credit works and how cost share reduction works. Because as they go through the different levels, you can end up, yes, it looks like you're paying $500, but a lot of employers now are doing high deductible plans. And if you qualify for a cost share reduction through the marketplace, you can actually have a lower deductible and much lower copays, and then a credit towards paying for that premium. So your net cost when you get done for the end of the year might be less than what you see on the surface when you see that $500 price tag.
And Steve, to ask you some questions, do you have health insurance?
I have Medicaid. I've had 4 back surgeries.
Okay.
But
I
off
was
work.
just thinking about her lumping onto your insurance. Now, what Tim just
how can
said.
we can't afford $500
Well,
a month.
that's
for
what
insurance,
I was
and
going to
that's how
have
you slice it
Tim
up.
break down what he said, because that whoosh,
Well,
probably
with
went
this-
over my head. But I think Tim said, hopefully your wife's looking at it correctly, and it might be cheaper than what she's actually seeing. Am I correct? Is that what I can dice up what you said?
Exactly. Sometimes, you know, when you look at the marketplace and you do the estimator, you see the, you know, the price tag for the insurance premium. When you go in there and you actually look at the different things, and depending on how somebody uses their insurance, that's where we advise them on the different levels between the bronze, gold,
Because
silver.
I'm thinking, and do you guys have any kids, Steve, at home?
Yes, we have 2 children at the house, and her employer, which is a Canadian-owned operation, they've got 5 employees at the warehouse up here. They do not offer any kind of health insurance, nor do they ever plan on it. And she's looking, you know, for another job that might possibly help out with the health care coverage for herself. Now, she's been without it for, boy, at least 8 years.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. At $500 price tag that you're talking about, is that from the employer or is that through the marketplace?
That's through the marketplace. She tried Obamacare. It kicked her over to...
Steve, how much
the
does
New
she
York State
approximately
website.
make a year? How much does she approximately make a year?
under 20,000.
I can't believe it would be that much for a household of 4, Tim.
And the kids, how are the kids covered?
The kids are covered. I just got them on. We
Okay.
had New York State Child Health Plus up until July 1st. They are now on Medicaid or Medicare, whatever it's called.
Yeah. What I would say, Steve, to do is call our office on Monday. We can hook you up with Tim, and he can ask you more detailed questions.
No charge to you.
No charge to you, and we'll see if we can beat that. Not we personally, but if Tim can find one cheaper for you than $500 a month for her, because based upon your income, that doesn't seem, and your family size, that doesn't seem right.
I mean,
Exactly.
what are you thinking, Tim? Just
No,
off the
I mean,
cuff.
based
Keep
on the
in
numbers,
mind, too, that they're counting my disability probably.
yes, they do. That's one of the things
income,
that
and
they do
that's not
count.
fair because I haven't worked in 14 years.
But there are some things that I have been working with the navigators, because that income is called through the marketplace, it's called tier 2 income, or wages or whatever. And because it doesn't really show up as earned income on your tax return, they call it tier 2. And there's some calculations and some things that we can do to see if there's a way for that to go through. Just like the disability or Social Security, there are some things on the application process that we'll want to review to make sure that the marketplace is looking at it correctly with the types of income that it is.
Well, I appreciate that. Any help we can get for her would be greatly appreciated.
Yep. So give us a call Monday morning, 632-7886. Ask for Tim, and if he's unavailable, we'll get in touch with him, and he will call you back right away, and we'll see what we can do for you. Okay?
Yeah, because
632-7886.
Correct.
Correct.
a $1,000 a month for health insurance is a lot of
Well,
money.
I know when we first started signing people up, we said, let's go to the marketplace, start filling out this huge questionnaire, and then we realized, let's show them the prices first.
Yeah.
Because he's right. Seeing those prices, people will just say, well, I got to eat, I got to pay my rent, or pay for my house. How do they expect me to pay for health insurance when I have $50 to my name left after all my bills?
And then
in theory, the law says that you should not pay more than 9.5% of your modified adjusted gross income for your insurance.
well, there you go.
But, that's where the premium and the credit works in. But when you see somebody's tax returns, and just like Steve's household, there can be things that, that the system you need to really look close at, because on the surface, that may not appear that they're paying greater than 9.5% for their health care.
And then to touch on the fact that he said that employer's never going to offer insurance. Correct me if I'm wrong, but starting in a few years, if you have greater than 50 employees, you have to offer health insurance for them. But so what about those employers that have less than 50 that they don't?
Yeah, that's a case by case, business by business decision as to what they want to provide. Obviously, it's something in the employment marketplace we might see competition.
Right.
Right. And it's not just one insurance. Okay, I want to get that out there. It's not one insurance you're buying when you go to the marketplace. I mean, in Erie County, I believe there's 6 different choices, and Independent Health, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Health Republic,
Univera, Fidelis.
Univera, Fidelis. So there's a wide range of premiums you can pay. And obviously, if you want the top level, you're going to pay the top price
but
for it.
I thought that was pretty cool. I didn't know what Tim said. There's tier 2 income that really doesn't show up in your tax
Right.
return, so that's treated differently. So in Steve's situation, that disability income might not have to show up, and so it would count as tier 2 income.
And they calculate a little bit. You do have to count it, but you have to take a look and see how it's in the equation for when they're calculating if they're eligible for premium or credit.
Yep. I mean, so it's a lot of different puzzle pieces to help determine your health insurance.
And then, as we were saying earlier, you have exemptions. And the other thing, too, is if you don't agree with what you find in the marketplace, where do I go? Obviously, Steve's going to contact us. We're going to help him out best we can, use the resources and the network that we developed. But there's also an appeal process. You can go through the marketplace, and when you go into your application, there's an appeal process that takes place. You go through that. What I have found from talking to the navigators in the area is the appeal process is not something that happens very fast. It can take a long time for the appeal process to take place. They're saying families could be 60 days, individuals could be 45 days, and just the evaluation process, if somebody's going through there that has a disability, could be 90 days. So what we want to do is exhaust all of the normal avenues before you go that process.
And
Well, I was going.
And I know, helping some people, you can call up New York State, and as long as they have a legitimate medical, why they have to get this insurance right away, they can force it through, not force it through, but force the case to one of the tops. Like, I had someone waiting for a kidney transplant, and the doctor wouldn't put him on until he had health insurance.
Exactly.
So he got approved the next day.
Exactly. And I worked with a case that we were waiting for a baby. We put in the due date, and the baby was late. So we had to, redo the application because the baby came later. Once that's in there, and the way the law is written, that anybody that's an expecting mother and any child that's born, they're covered immediately. No questions asked. They just basically go right to the front of the line. But, once that process takes place, then you need to make sure that they're in there under the coverage of the family.
Okay, and then that probably leads into what I was going to ask before Chris said something is, why would somebody need to fill out or file for an appeal? What are some of the reasons?
Well, just, that the case that they are not looking at their income correctly. They're not saying that their household, things like that. Chris had said earlier about the difficulties I was having. I went to the appeal process for my instance because I was trying to update my application in the marketplace just as the law says and being a law-abiding citizen,
right.
And they dropped all of my kids. Well, I have a son that's going to be leaving for college September 1st, and I'd like to send him to college with insurance coverage.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're EG Tax. We're here to help you. 632-7886 during the week, star 930 on your cell phone. Follow Tim on Twitter for the healthcare at
EG Tax _HLTHCARE.
Yep. And we look forward to having you on the show again in the future. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.